It has been brought to our attention that depending on the platform that you listen to, you can no longer hear some of our previous episodes.
Some of our favorite episodes.
Some of the ones where people would reach out and say, hey, listen, I can't believe that you talked to insert whatever name here.
And honestly, it makes us a little sad that you can't go back in time and have a listen because the stories were really incredible.
We reference a lot of times, we had a chance to talk with so-and-so in the past. And if you can't go back, then it's kind of just, So we wanted to bring some of those guests, some of those former guests back into the spotlight.
We're going to call it like a rerun, I think.
A Why Me Project rerun.
Do you remember those?
I do. Back in the day, or you used to throw the tape into the VCR and, we're dating ourselves.
We are, but a rerun was the opportunity to rewatch one of your favorite episodes. Now everything's so accessible. Well, we thought it was.
Yeah, exactly. So without further ado,
here's your Why Me Project rerun.
Knowing that we were going to speak with this gentleman today, over the weekend, I did extra things to just love on my wife because I was worried and scared. Dr. Gary Chapman, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm impressed that you were influenced to do something good.
I don't know why I get nervous every time we chat because I'm like, have I loved on my wife enough? Is she happy?
Are you speaking your love languages?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, Dr. Chapman, we like to ask the skill testing question because we never know where it's going to go. Who are you and where did you come from?
You know, I live in North Carolina, and I work on a church staff. I have been on the same staff for 48 years. I guess I must have started when I was 15.
Yeah, nice and young.
And the major part of my ministry through the years has been counseling, marriage and family counseling. I'm married to Carolyn, a wonderful lady. I didn't say that in the early years of the marriage because we struggled a lot. And we have two grown children. One is a medical doctor, and one is I don't know what we call him. He's a Jesus follower and kind of out on the edge, meeting people out there that I would never be able to reach. So we love our two grown children. We have two grandchildren, both of whom are in college now. God has been good through the years, and a lot of my work has been obviously counseling, and then my books have all grown out of the counseling.
Was faith always a big part of your life?
Yeah, you know, I became a believer in as a child at 10 years of age. People sometimes say, "Do you think children really understand what they're doing?" And my answer is, I can only tell you my experience. You know, I was 10 years old, and I was sitting in church, and I heard the pastor preaching, and it keenly dawned on me, I have never asked Jesus into my life. And there was a strong emotional pull to respond to him, which I did. At the end of the service, I went up and I prayed with the pastor, and I want to give my life to Jesus. It was very real to me, and obviously I didn't know all the theology and everything that goes with that, but the relationship began at that point. And through the high school years, I was very active in our youth ministry, and by the time I finished high school, I knew in my heart that God was leading me to do some kind of ministry for him. I only knew that there was two things you could do if you were in full-time ministry. One is you could be a missionary, and one you could be a pastor. And I didn't like snakes, so I thought, well, I probably should be a pastor. So anyway, it's been very interesting. By the time when I finished high school, I went to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. And by the time I finished there, I really sensed God wanted me to be a missionary. So I went to Wheaton College and majored in anthropology, the study of cultures, to prepare myself for that. And then after my wife and I got married, we both felt led to missions. And so I went back and did the PhD in order to teach in a seminary in Nigeria to train nationals to reach their people, which was what I felt was the way to reach a nation. And we applied to the mission board after I'd finished my PhD, and we got turned down because of my wife's health. And it was a time of struggle for us. You know, we couldn't figure why God would let this happen, first of all, and what's wrong with the mission board. You know, we didn't see that she was that bad. And anyway, as time went on, and, God led me into the ministry that I've had here locally, and my books have now been translated in over 50 languages around the world. And one night I was opening some books, and Carol and I always pray for the country where the books are being published. And I looked on the couch, and she was crying, and I said, honey, what's wrong? And she said, nothing's wrong. I just remember we wanted to be missionaries, and now your books are all over the world. It was one of those moments when I realized, God's plans are often better than our plans and bigger than our plans. So that's been a real lesson for me through the years that I've been able to share with others. Sometimes when what we see as a roadblock is not a roadblock, it's God's guidance pushing us where He wants us to be.
When it came to your early years, high school, just coming out of high school, thinking, okay, I'm going to be a missionary, I'm going to be a pastor, did you ever in a million years think that at some point you'd be ending up really playing such an important role in a lot of couples' relationships? Never crossed my mind.
In fact, even when I started to work in the church where I am now, I never thought I would even get into counseling. I mean, I had taken counseling courses at seminary, but I never saw that as going to be a major part of my life. But when I got into the local church, what I found is that where people are struggling is in marriage and family. And so I would lead a class on marriage or a class on parenting, and then the people that were really struggling wanted to talk outside class. So I kind of got pushed into counseling, but it became a major part of my ministry on the church. I've always been an associate pastor. I didn't come here as a senior pastor, the preaching pastor, though I've done a lot of preaching through the years, obviously, and I've served as an interim pastor at our church here for 2 different times. I never anticipated that I would spend a lot of my life in counseling couples with their marriage. But it became a major part of my ministry, and as I said earlier, my books really grew out of that. So, again, God's plans are not always revealed up front. we experience them day by day.
It's interesting, though, because if you look at 5 love languages, the concept of it is simple now after I've read it, but why did you decide to write the book?
It grew out of my own discovery of the concept. I would hear couples sit in my office over and over again, and one of them would say, I feel like he doesn't love me, or she doesn't love me. And the other one would say, I don't understand that. I do this and this. Why would you not feel loved? And I knew there was a pattern. So one day I finally sat down and read several years of notes that I made when I was counseling people and asked myself the question, when someone sat in my office and said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories. That's where the 5 came from. And then I started using the concept that if you want her to feel loved, you've got to express love in her love language. If you want him to feel loved, you've got to express love in his love language. And I would help couples discover each other's love language, challenge them to go home and try it, and sometimes they would come back in 3 weeks and say, Gary, this is changing everything. The whole climate's different now. And then I started using it in small groups of couples, and the same thing would happen. Probably 5 years later, I thought, if I could put this concept in a book, write it in the language of the common person, leave out psychological jargon, maybe I could help a lot of couples I would never have time to see in my office. Of course, little did I know the book would sell now over 13 million copies in English and be translated in 51 languages around the world. Oh, so, you never know what God's up to. You just walk with Him.
You write books, you go to conferences, you've got a radio talk show. For you, is there one area that's your favorite?
I really enjoy everything I do. People have asked me, what would you like to do if you retired? I said, I'd like to do what I'm doing. Why would I retire? I'm a fortunate person, I know. But when you really sense that you're doing the best thing you could possibly do with your life, there's no reason to stop doing it as long as God gives you health and energy and vision for doing it.
Do you find that people resort to their own love language when it comes to loving their spouse because it's just easier?
Yes, I think by nature, if you don't know anything about love languages at all, what we all do by nature is we express love to the other person in the manner that would make us feel loved if they were doing that to us. So if we feel appreciated when people, give us affirming words, then what we will do when we get married is just we'll give our spouse affirming words. And we'll tell them how nice they look, and we'll tell them how much we appreciate what they did, and we'll tell them, I love you. It's just natural that we speak the language that we want to receive. But the reality is, in a marriage, seldom does a husband and wife have the same language. So he's speaking his language to her, she's not getting it. And she's speaking her language to him, and he's not getting it. So in their minds, they each love the other, but neither one of them feel loved. That's why the love language is so important, because it helps us do what we really want to do, and that is communicate love to the other person. I think everybody realizes that perhaps our deepest emotional need on the human plane is to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. And if you're married, the relationship you would most like to feel loved is your marriage. In fact, if you feel loved by your husband, by your wife, life is pretty beautiful. If you don't feel loved, life is pretty dark. And the same thing's true of a child. I say to parents, the question is not, do you love your children? The question is, do your children feel loved? There's a difference, I mean, they sit in my office, 13-year-old. He's run away from home, and he says to me, my parents don't love me. I know his parents. I know they love him, but he doesn't feel loved because they're not speaking his love language. So this has application in all human relationships.
You've probably done this a million times, and for those who maybe haven't heard, could we kind of just do a quick rundown of what the 5 love languages are?
Sure. One is words of affirmation, just affirming to the other person something that you appreciate about them or you like about them. With children, it's saying such things as, I like your muscles. You really look pretty in that dress. I really appreciate the fact that you picked your toys up. I mean, it's just, looking for things you can affirm people about. So words of affirmation, and then gifts. It is universal to give gifts as an expression of love. The gift says, they were thinking about me. Look what they got for me. The gift doesn't have to be expensive. It's the fact that we thought about them when we were apart, and we got a gift for them. So gifts. A third love language is acts of service, doing something for the other person that they would like for you to do. There's an old saying that says, actions speak louder than words. It's true if this is your love language. It's not true for everyone, but if this is your love language, actions will speak louder than words. In a marriage, this would be such things as cooking a meal, washing dishes, vacuuming floors, washing the car, walking the dog, changing the baby's diaper, anything that the other person would like for you to do, acts of service. Number 4 is quality time, giving the person your undivided attention. These are folks who like to sit down and talk over the meal time. These are folks who like to take a walk together and talk to each other as they walk. These are people who want to sit on the couch and just share some time together, undivided attention. TV is off, computer's down. We're not answering the phone. We're just sharing life with each other, quality time. And then number 5 is physical touch. We've long known the emotional power of physical touch. That's why we pick up babies, hold them, kiss them, cuddle them, long before the baby understands the meaning of the word love. The baby feels love by physical touch. So those are the 5 languages, and the basic concept is that each of us has a primary love language. One of them speaks more deeply to us emotionally than the other 4. So what you want to do is learn the primary love language of the other person, whether it's your spouse or your child or your teenager. And then you give heavy doses of the primary, but you sprinkle in the other 4. You get extra credit, It's not that you speak only the one, but you have to give heavy doses of the one. Otherwise, they don't feel loved.
I have a bit of a 2-part question. When it comes to marriage, there's a lot of negativity about it. It doesn't matter if you're Christian or you're non-Christian. It seems as though, and I've heard a lot of people say that marriage is doomed.
I don't think that's true. I think the opposite really is true. Deep within every one of us, there is a longing to have an intimate relationship. Sexually, we are drawn to each other, male and female, by and large. And something inside of us wants to have an intimate relationship with another person. Marriage is designed to be the most intimate of all human relationships. We're going to share life intellectually, emotionally, socially, physically, spiritually, and we're going to share life to such a degree that really we could say we are one. It doesn't mean that we lose our individuality, but it does mean we have a deep sense of intimacy. And I think that's why marriage is universal. All human cultures have some form of marriage. And I don't think marriage is doomed. I think marriage is difficult. And the biggest culprit in having a healthy marriage is selfishness. And we all are infected with the disease. We all, by nature, are self-centered. We are egocentric. And there's a good part to that because it means we feed ourselves, we get our sleep, we get our exercise, we take care of ourselves. But when that becomes selfishness and we view all of life in terms of what am I getting out of this, then you hear people say, well, you're not making me happy, so I'm out of here. What about the other side? Why don't you focus on making the other person happy? Focus on meeting their needs. You see, love is the opposite of selfishness. Love is the attitude which says, how can I enrich your life? How can I help you? How can I make your life easier? So the answer to selfishness is love. And the good news is we choose our attitude. We can choose to be loving or we can choose to be selfish. By nature, we are selfish, but we can choose to love. And when we do, marriage becomes what we wanted it to be, a close, intimate, warm, supportive, caring relationship. And few things in life bring greater satisfaction on the human plane than a marriage that is characterized by each of them loving the other.
You've been a counselor, you've been a pastor for a number of years, and there obviously are a lot of marriages that go through their trials and their tribulations. Do you think that all marriages can be saved?
I like to believe that they can. I know that not all of them will be because it takes two people to have a long-term healthy marriage. One person can create a divorce, and the other person cannot keep them from having divorce. So I always have hope for couples, and I often say to them, if they tell me they have no hope for their marriage, I say, I can understand that. I can see how you'd get there. I remember when I felt that way in my own marriage in the early years. But I say, I have hope for you. I've been working with couples for a long time. I have hope for you. So why don't you go on my hope for a while? And I don't ask them, do you want to work on your marriage? Want to is an emotional word. Mm-hmm. And many times they've already given up in their mind. They've already concluded, it's not going to work. So I don't say, do you want to work? I say, are you willing to work on your marriage? Will you work on your marriage? Because will is a choice. And if they say, okay, we'll try some things, then fine, then I'll meet with you, and we'll see what can happen. If they're willing, I believe that they can have a good marriage. Obviously, sometimes they're not willing, or one of them is not willing. And as I said, that one can create divorce. It takes two to create a loving, supportive marriage.
Do you ever get discouraged in dealing with relationships and in couples, or is there anything that really keeps you going and excited about being able to continue to build into relationships?
Well, I think all counselors would say that we feel some disappointment when we spend time, and sometimes considerable time, with a couple trying to help them, and then ultimately they end up divorcing each other. It can be discouraging, but I find great encouragement in helping people. And what has been so encouraging for me and the 5 love languages is how many people have said to me through the years, Gary, that book really, it saved our marriage. We were at the next door to divorce. Somebody gave us that book. We read it. It's like the lights came on. And we realized how we had missed each other through the years. So we took the test. We began trying to speak each other's language, and everything turned around. And the whole climate changed, and it literally saved our marriage. So that's extremely encouraging to me. And everywhere I go, doing marriage seminars or date nights, people will share similar things to me as to how the concept of the love languages literally turned their marriage around. Very, very encouraging.
It seems like just in pop culture in general, there is just this fascination with just relationships in general and how are they going to turn out. I mean, you think of some of the TV shows like Married at First Sight. A lot of people love that show in particular. What are your takes on some of these marriage-type shows on TV?
Well, obviously, all of them are somewhat different, and some of them you do get encouragement, and some of them you get discouraged when you watch them. I don't know. I guess it's the producer or the author, or, who determines which kind of slant it's going to be. A lot of times they make fun of marriage. I mean, I've seen that. The reality, I think, behind the fun, often there's hurt. They're laughing, but inside they're hurting. Because, as I said earlier, I think by nature we all want to have an intimate relationship that will last for a lifetime. I did some research some years ago with younger people, and I think it was 70-some%, as I remember, who said to me, I want to have one marriage that will last a lifetime. Some of them have seen their parents divorce, and they don't want to go through that. That's why some of them wait longer to get married, because they don't want to go through divorce. They want to make sure they're doing the right thing and they're mature enough to have a healthy marriage. I think, the TV programs and the movies can be helpful or they can be discouraging. It depends on the nature of the particular program.
As you're saying, you research, you do a lot of reading, there's a lot of learning, but we're told that you never stop learning. Is there anything lately that you have learned or that has surprised you?
Well, in terms of marriage relationships, after I've been counseling over 40 years, I don't run into many new things in terms of the things that people struggle with. But I do think that we do keep learning in our relationships. That's why I said earlier, I used the word growing. We're either growing or we're regressing. We're either learning or we're forgetting some of the things we learned earlier that were working at one time, and then we kind of dropped the ball. I meet couples, for example, who say, we read the book on the love languages, and we took the quiz, and we started speaking each other's love language, and things were really good for a while. And then we got busy with our children, or we got busy with the business or something, and we just kind of let it slide. And we woke up one day and realized, hey, wait a minute, things aren't like they need to be, So I think we either keep learning or as we kind of regress, we kind of unlearn some things that we did learn, and we're not practicing them now. And that's why, again, a night like this where you go out and expose to some things again about marriage is a way of getting things back on the front burner so that we can have the marriage that we want to have.
In the hills and valleys of life, in the times where you're on these mountaintops that God is using you, or you're in the valleys, you ask that question, why me? Can you think of one of those moments in your life?
Yeah, I think in the early days of our marriage, before I got married, I could hardly wait to be as happy as I was going to be. My wife was going to make me happy. I intended to make her happy also, but I was going to be happy. But my wife and I dated 2 years before we got married, and what I know now that I didn't know then is the average lifespan of the obsessive in-love experience is about 2 years. So I came down off the high pretty soon after we got married, and our differences emerged, and I didn't know how to solve conflicts because when you're in love, you don't think you'll have any. And so we argued with each other, and we said hateful things to each other, and after a while, probably 6 months into the marriage, I was thinking, man, I have made a serious mistake here. I thought I was in love, but I've lost it. I don't have those feelings, and we just disagree on so many things. And so, yeah, I said to God, I said, wait, I prayed. I asked you, don't let me marry her if it's not the person for me. And then I said, you let me do it. So I'm kind of mad at God. Why are you treating me this way? Mm-hmm. There were real moments of struggle in my life at that juncture. I think any time that things don't turn out the way we think they should turn out, we can say, why is God doing this to me? Why did he let this happen to me? So it's a normal human response, I think. The reality is God is with us, and if we will run to him rather than running from him, he will help us make the situation different from what it is now, or he will give us what we need to walk through the difficult situation.
I love that you talk about heading into a marriage of all of these expectations. For you, do you have a checklist that you would give to young couples who are heading into marriage, maybe 2 things that they should do before they get married?
Well, I have a book that I wrote a few years ago called Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Got Married. It's 12 things that I wish I had known then that would have made my marriage much easier. And I would encourage every couple that's thinking about marriage to work through that book. One of them is, I wish I'd known that romantic love has 2 stages. The in-love experience, and then when you come down off the high, the more intentional love. And that's where the love language fits in. If you don't know their love language, then the love tank gets empty, and you do begin to wonder, why did we marry each other? We don't even like each other. So that would be the first thing I would say. Out of the 12, if I'm going to pick 2, I would pick that one. The other one I think I would pick would be, we have to learn that apology is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And the reason I say that is we will fail each other from time to time because none of us are perfect. You don't have to be perfect to have a good marriage, but you do have to deal with your failures, and that involves apologizing when you do wrong. So I would say if you get those 2 things down, you're probably going to move in a very positive direction in your marriage.
5lovelanguages.com, at Dr. Gary Chapman on social media. My friend, we appreciate you for taking the time and hanging out with us.
Well, thank you, Johnny and Hollie. Good to be with you guys. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for tuning in to an old episode, a past guest of our Why Me Project rerun.
Something that we're starting now because there are so many episodes that we really did love, and they've kind of disappeared from the digital world.
And speaking of digital world, I did a little recon. There are at least 9 different platforms in which you can listen to the Why Me Project podcast.
Okay.
So there's no excuses, but I mean, some of the main ones like Apple Podcast and or Spotify.
And you could always head to our social media accounts to stay up to date, as each and every Wednesday we have a brand new episode for Why Me Project. And you can also let us know if there's someone that you would like to hear on a future episode.
At Why Me Project on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Why Me Project at Outlook.com.